talk a little bit about the way Impacts looks at these issues. Who are we? So Impacts is a 15-year-old firm based in London. We invest only in what we call resource optimization. People describe it as environmental markets activities. We manage about $3.6 billion in both public and private equity funds. And from our inception, 100% of our investments have been fossil free. It's the only way that we know to operate, because the fundamental presumption about the company is that these markets would increase faster than the broader investment community opportunities over the course of the coming 4, 5, 6 decades, as far as we can see out. We manage funds for somewhere over 100 major institutional clients worldwide, and here in the U.S., we're happy to have the opportunity to manage a fund for Pax World. I want to introduce Bob Helmuth out in the audience here. Bob represents Pax World. There's another work here in Seattle, actually, and Pax World is also one of the sponsors for the event today. This fund, the Pax World Global Environmental Markets Fund, which Pax World offers, is unique in our experience, because not only is it fossil-free like all the rest of our portfolios, it's now also carbon neutral, which is not true of the other portfolios we manage. So earlier this year, we did some research as we heard more discussions about the fossil fuel divestment conversation. And we wanted to focus on the pressure that we saw building on institutional investors and public positions. The reason why all of us are here today. It's clear this is going to become an increasingly important topic. It was also clear that financial analysts were focusing on the potential risks that might come over time from the changes in regulatory regimes which impose an effective cost on carbon, or otherwise restricted or limited the kinds of opportunities which traditional fossil fuel companies would be able to work within. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether fiduciaries or trustees were favorably inclined or negatively inclined that this is an idea. They still had to make very important decisions about how they manage funds, because they do have responsibilities that go well beyond their individual preferences, and we've seen that demonstrated, and people take the conversation very seriously, and I think that's an appropriate thing across the board. So we've suggested that there are opportunities, and this was a figure of our research, to compare the impact of working with and without fossil fuel positions in model portfolios. And although we're not a research house, we are just a management firm, we decided it would be interesting to take a look at this issue from a theoretical perspective, and you'll see the results of our research today. First of all, I have to say that within the work that we do, we spend a fair amount of time dispelling 5 myths that relate to the issue of climate change, and specifically climate change and investment. The science is too uncertain to act. We hear that a lot. Actually, the very best answer to that is the do the math conversation. Nobody is better than Bill Kibben and 350 at making that case. I will point out one variant that we like. Roughly 30 billion tons of CO2 emissions globally on an annual basis. Roughly 15 taken back up by the planet in its normal activities. Roughly 15 net additional tons of CO2 in the atmosphere every year. If the figures we've seen earlier about the concentration of CO2 that we can achieve in the atmosphere and stay under 2 degrees centigrade are correct, then we've got, at the current rate of addition to the CO2 load, about 30 years. Unfortunately, the rate of CO2 consumption and displacement into the atmosphere is going up, so we actually have less than 30 years. That's like tomorrow. So if any of you wonder why the 350 teams at college campuses are really upset about this issue, you have to understand that their 401k is looking right at this class of issues for their entire working life. So we have to be responsive to those kinds of concerns. It is an intergenerational issue. We also have investors come to us and say that they really can wait. Now, it's not an issue we have to deal with now. Climate change is in the future. It's going to happen whenever the IPCC says it's happening. It's nothing that I have to pay attention to now. Not true. 3 gigawatts of coal-fired power plants closed in Australia in the last couple of years. New EPA regulations and positions will result in something on the order of 50 gigawatts of coal plants being closed in the U.S., and we've seen 16 gigawatts of coal plants closed in the last 2 years in the United States. These are impacts that are happening right now. On the other hand, we look at what's happening in the renewable energy markets, and we see renewable deployment on a global basis occurring at twice the rate of all other energy installations worldwide. So this is a market that's growing very rapidly. We'll see some stats on that a bit later. Next, we see people telling us that climate change is all about risk, not about return. It's an understandable concern because sometimes people hear the language about social responsibility or intergenerational equity, and they think that this isn't a conversation for them if they're a hard-nosed finance person. But in fact, we're talking about a situation where there is a great deal of change taking place, and change always triggers both opportunity and risk. We spend all our time working these markets, and we and the index provider FTSE have identified about 1,500 companies that are active in the range of markets we've been talking about, low carbon activities broadly defined. And our investment activity takes place with activities take place with them on literally a daily basis within that universe. And we see terrific opportunities in energy efficiency, in smarter grids, development of resource recovery activities, water treatment and processing. All of these opportunities are active investment potentials for us to see right now, and we make our living as financiers investing just in. And the last point, my managers can handle. Don't bother me with this climate change stuff. That's why I pay this guy fees that are too high in the first place. They'll take care of it. It's fair, it's understandable, it's reasonable, but it's not true. It is the case that investors themselves need to think about so-called fat-tailed or black swan risks, because managers either don't do it because they don't see it as a job every day, or in some cases they don't do it because they can't. They are restricted to the nature of the perspectives of the funds in which you invested. It limits their range of options. So it is up to you as fiduciaries to make decisions about how you want to see these larger risk considerations play out. It's also the case that the policy changes that may take place will produce potentially sudden repricing of asset values. And by the time we figure that out, it'll be too late to take advantage of the market opportunities that might have existed today to reposition the portfolio. So we argue that fiduciaries need to look seriously for diversified portfolios that include effectively a hedge against the coming climate risk in their underlying positions. So we looked at 4 scenarios. I'm going to go very quickly through these because now we're starting to cover territory that Dan and Tom have covered in more detail with, frankly, even more sophisticated data sets. We looked at 4 portfolio options. One was a fossil-free portfolio, similar to the work that Dan and Tom talked about. We looked at one portfolio where we took out all the fossil fuel positions and replaced them with a passive alternative energy set of investments, so not actively managed by them, just an index position. We looked at doing the same thing with an actively managed portfolio, and we used our own historical performance as a guide because we had access to that for comparative purposes. And then we also looked at a different prospect, the idea of taking the money that was in fossil fuels, divesting it, and reinvesting it in a broader universe of low-carbon investment potentials that included impacted subsectors of water and waste and sustainable agriculture, in addition to the renewables and energy efficiency that you would automatically expect. So the result, that's the chart you've seen. It's that they all look the same. The lines diverge slightly. The good guys are in the fossil-free line, which is the one on the top, but the difference is really not material. What's interesting, I think, is the next slide. There's a white paper we did, by the way, on this. If anyone's interested, I'll get it to you after the fact. We'll get it up on the website, which provides all 4 scenarios. What's interesting about this slide is that the same thing happens when we are looking at the performance associated with an investment in a broader universe of low-carbon holdings. Energy efficiency, renewables, but also impacted water and resource recycling sectors. And that combination actually produced the best returns. We'll see in a minute. what's important about all of these charts, everything that you've seen today that look like this, for the people in this room who've been seeing these things come down the pike for the last 6 months, they're all saying, I know that, I've seen it, thank you very much. I'm here to tell you that the best financial managers in America do not know this, or they didn't know it 6 months ago. One of my favorite stories, there's a wonderful investor who is, in fact, a leader on a universe of socially responsible investment activities, deeply committed to all these issues we've been talking about now, and women's equality issues and market equity issues, and a tremendous person. And I was talking to her about her portfolio, which was fairly traditional in design. And she said, look, we can do all these wonderful things, we can support all these activities, but don't take away my ExxonMobil because I can't do my job if you do it. Well, it turns out she could have done her job without her ExxonMobil, and she really didn't know that. So the fact that these lines all look the same might tend to, in my view, could tend for some of you to sort of downplay the importance of the information that you're getting. But these studies and a half dozen more have all shown so far, the same fundamental result. And that's something you have to take away, because if you're not the chief financial officer in a fiduciary, I guarantee you, when you tell the chief financial officer that, he will not believe you, or she will. So, these are hard to see. What matters in this page? Well, what matters in this page is there isn't much divergence among these different activities. They all do better than the original core MSCI world with fossil fuels, and having an activity that includes the broader sort of low carbon universe, which is the bottom line, produces results which are marginally better than the other options. In part, that's because we're trying to address, the reason that fourth line is important is, goes to the end of Tom's talk. He was saying, but if you're divesting from fossil energy, you are removing your position as an investor from something like, pick a number, 9 to 12% of the global economy, which is related to fossil fuel activity. That's a fair concern. As a fiduciary, you have to think seriously about what that impact will be over time. And one of the things you might want to think about, and most will, is, well, how can I capture some of the dynamic that's associated with the energy sector, which is a dynamic, large, fast, in many cases fast-growing at various angles, and historically important sector. How can I capture some of that dynamic for the benefit of my portfolio without being in fossil fuels, which have dominated all the activities and the indices, frankly, because of the indices that are effectively made up only of fossil fuel companies. How can I capture the dynamic of the sector, of the energy sector, without investing exclusively in fossil fuel activities? And we think the answer is you can, is by working in this broader universe of low carbon investment. And the simplest example here is that we invest particularly heavily in this constellation of low carbon investments, and both our portfolios and the weightings of the indices have a significant position in energy efficiency. It's the largest single block of all the activities, which I think makes sense to all of us. Well, it turns out that there is a reasonably good correlation between energy efficiency, investment returns, and performance over time, and the performance of the traditional fossil indices, something on the order of correlation coefficient, something on the order of 0.8 to 0.9. So it's not stunningly surprising that if energy prices go up, people are more interested in energy efficiency activities. So if we look quickly, here are MSCI Energy Holdings, energy sector holdings, top 10. And those companies are, not surprisingly, they're all familiar names, they're almost all, these are all familiar names to me anyway. 9 of 10 of them are on Mark's Carbon Tracker Do Not Go Here list. Schlumberger is the only one that is not on the list that we looked at. Here are the holdings, top 10 holdings in the low carbon universe we're describing. It's actually a FTSE index, FTSE Environmental Opportunity Energy universe. Now, there actually are no traditional energy companies in that list, but what you can see, and I think this is important, is there are names that you recognize. We're not talking about shifting your portfolio here into something that your investors wouldn't recognize. Siemens, Honeywell, ABB, Emerson, Schneider, Eaton. These are companies that, Johnson Controls, these are companies that are well capitalized, well established. They do not bring material additional risk. You can see that if you look at the performance of these excited in the energy and alternative energy is obvious. Energy efficiency, clearly for us, a very important opportunity sector. We think that the combination of those kinds of opportunities will drive increased commitment of capital to the marketplace over the course of the next couple of decades. And we think that these activities are going to be connected to or multiplied by the kinds of impacts we see on reductions in access or increase in prices to a range of natural resources. At the same time, we're seeing significant advances in reductions of cost. I think everyone knows how much solar panels have dropped in price, literally 70% in the last 6 or 7 years. So this is a vibrant marketplace with a great deal of opportunity and one that's growing very, very rapidly. The International Energy Agency has said that if we're going to hit that goal of getting total increase in temperature climate-wide to only 2 degrees C, we'll have to make an incremental investment of which will total almost 50% of that will go directly to energy efficiency. That's the biggest single piece. Another 28% will go into the low-carbon transport sector, and 21% will go directly into clean energy. Here's the clean energy chart, because I happen to have it handy. This is from Bloomberg New Energy Finance. The Bloomberg team's estimate is that the real-world numbers were between the top 2 lines somewhere. And what that means is that they expect that the annual capital requirements in low-carbon energy will be between $600 and $900 billion every year. We're currently expending, in a very robust industry, about $200 billion. And you can see those lines ramp up reasonably quickly. Half a decade from now, we're looking at a very interesting and unique environment. We consider this a growth industry. That's where we like to invest. And we know that there are similar potentials for lines that look like this for the increase in deployment and penetration of energy efficiency, and also when we look at activities in the low-carbon transport. I just want to touch on, I think we've heard enough about the energy side. Water is an interesting question here. More and more regions of the world are water stressed. Today, by 2030, half of the planet is projected to be water stressed. And that's driving enormous investments in the sector. It's been a really good time to be an investor in water-related companies. And one example of that is what's happening in China today. China has just announced a commitment to spend $600 billion in water reclamation improvement resource activities over the next 5 years. That's a big number even for China. Why? China has, I love this stat, China has lost half of the rivers that existed in the country in 1950. They're gone. They're just gone. That's caught even the Chinese by surprise, and they are responding in ways that make a lot of sense. But the problem is enormous. In northern China, which is more arid and also being developed rapidly from an industrial perspective, they are looking at a situation where half of the available water all across the northern swath of China is unsuitable for industrial use. It's too polluted to use in a factory. 70% of the water is unsuitable for human contact. You can't use it to wash it. And the amount of water naturally occurring in northern China, which is potable, can actually be consumed in a glass, is tiny, almost non-existent. So that's the kind of driver that we're seeing. We're also seeing activities in food and agriculture. There are a couple of drivers. There's sustainable agriculture for moral reasons, but purely practical reasons. Fuel is expensive. You can do lower cost inputs, less expensive fertilizer use, less fossil fuel-driven fertilizer use. You reduce costs, you improve returns. It's an enormous growth market that we've been increasingly active in the last couple of years. So let's be specific about the kinds of opportunities that we're looking at. I really apologize for this. These are going to be hard to read. These little boxes. It's a list of 28 individual subsectors, and it's showing that there's a lot of diversity in the sector. It's not just one thing. It's not just energy efficiency. Just in energy efficiency, you're talking about building energy efficiency, power network energy efficiency, transport energy efficiency, storage, all these different subsectors where an investment can play. 1,500 companies, $3.3 trillion in total market cap. This is an important part of the global economy. But interestingly, when we look on this page, I have to do this carefully because I have to keep pushing this. And as I push this, you're going to see some of these change color. And get a little older. There we go. All of these going to green, so clever, going to green subsectors are low carbon. They're directly producing impacts of lower carbon activity. Oh, so that 75% of the subsectors in which we operate and invest are directly represented in a low carbon investment universe. And in the portfolios that we manage, the actual allocation by on a weighted capital basis is significantly higher. So this is an indication of the range of opportunities that investors have, and it's why it's not hard for us to produce balanced returns, portfolios that track or outperform the standard financial indices, but at the same time have risks that look exactly like the risk patterns look exactly like those indices. So, wrap up. Based on the research we've done, we do think that investors should seriously consider divesting their fossil fuel holdings over time and looking for new ways to deploy their capital on a global basis. We think that there are interesting opportunities for simply divesting, but one can produce a better balanced portfolio and also earn, over time, we believe, equal or stronger returns from maintaining a portfolio that's broader in its overall scope, has more activity in low carbon investment than just taking yourself out of the fossil fuel industry, because you do want to capture the interesting dynamics of the energy marketplace. It's clear to us that we are facing globally heightening carbon regulation prospects. They're not coming tomorrow in the U.S., but the backdoor effect of EPA activities is producing a very similar result here. But we are seeing these changes, as Steve said, in China, other markets around the world, California, for example. It is the case that if you were really clever, you figure out when this was all happening and you can move your money just before it took place. But these changes are incremental. They're episodic. They're not going to happen in a steady paced fashion. And that guarantees that no investment manager will successfully time against them on an ongoing basis. So the answer is, don't wait for that. The risk is there. It's evident. The opportunities are there. They're evident. Begin to reposition the portfolios now. So, given everything that we've learned over the course of the discussion today, and all the studies that were summarized here and the studies that we've seen by others in the market which show similar results, we think that it is time for investors to carefully assess whether the risk of owning fossil fuels justifies the potential returns that they anticipate from those portfolios. And we think that those investors need to consider whether they should respond to the coming climate challenges by shifting their portfolios to become part of the low carbon solution.